I often wonder, why aren't more people interested in a flourishing life? Why are we so prone to get sidetracked into a life of worries, a life of narrowing interests, a life of hurt feelings and ready resentments that smoulder on? Was a time, surely, when we were free of the worries that now clamour for our full attention. Was a time, surely, when we caught a glimpse of that large, expansive possibilities for life, now narrowed down into smaller things. Was a time when we knew that love and laughter were far better than hate and hostility, that encouragement and compassion were far better than criticism and carping. Was a time when we knew that faith in generosity and goodness was far better than succumbing to the ruminations of recrimination and revenge. But there we are. We so readily succumb to these things. Most of us are endowed with a load of love, large containers of compassion, and an expansive sense of goodness. But no matter where we live, no matter what our patch might be, we are tyrannized every day by three ghosts: the ghost of worry, the ghost of the frightened, narrow mind, and the ghost of an angry vindictiveness. A vindictiveness that refuses to let life's wounds be healed. These three ghosts restrict our life energy. They block our pathways. And although we may have spasms of enjoyment, we hesitate to say we're flourishing. Not just this last week, I read David Malouf's long essay on happiness. It is a long essay, pages after page on happiness, and he comes to the end of it, and I think he comes to the conclusion that we might only expect to have some spasms of fulfillment and happiness. Surely we might think of doing better than that when we flourish. Sometimes I know flourishing seems to be beyond us, too good for us, or something that resists too careful a definition in case we have to deny its part in our lives. So I want to take these three ghosts, and like all ghosts, the three are largely expressions of a malfunctioning imagination. The three minds that restrict our lives and block the pathway to our flourishing life, sooner or later, are about our imagination. Take the worrying mind. Of course, if you and your family are living somewhere on the border of Syria and Lebanon, or Syria and Israel, or Syria and Jordan, you will quickly remind me that your worries are very real. Your worries over safety, over supplies of food and shelter, over the future, you'll say are very well founded. But if you were in that situation, is your worry a helpful friend or a load you carry, an extra load you carry? If you're waiting for the results of your biopsy taken last week, you may say, surely it is human to worry about the results, about what might happen, about the future. But is your worry a helpful friend, or is it an additional load? And if you have become somewhat captivated by the media, by the politicians of the day, or by the commentaries of experts all telling us about what's going to happen next or what could happen tomorrow, you will say you can't help but worry. Even those well-based worries can run out of control And imagination runs out of control. We imagine what might happen. We imagine what must have happened. We imagine the ghost of him, this ghost of imagination holds hands with fear, takes over our inner strength, corrodes our inner spirit, and there we are. The second ghost, the ghost of the narrow mind. Nobody likes to be called narrow-minded. We like to say, no, we're not narrow-minded. We've just made up our minds. We've reached a rational conclusion. There'll be no more discussion. Case closed. The talking is finished. And of course there is this discourse that needs to take place between that firmness of resolution and the narrow-mindedness of our way of life at times. It can be difficult to make that distinction between a rational closure and a narrow-mindedness that can't really bear to think of any other possibility, that can't really bear to think of going outside the circle which you've drawn. And of course, many expressions of religion are carriers of this ghost of narrow-mindedness, where the gift of imagination is misused. Again, this ghost holds hands with fear. And the person may claim they can't imagine life without the narrow boundaries they have drawn or the narrow boundaries that have been imposed upon them. Some people have closed their minds, closed the doors on certain subjects. Others live their lives in terms of their narrow boundaries. And the question may well be asked, can a person holding a narrow-minded approach to life live a flourishing life? Can you be narrow-minded and flourish at the same time? And they might say, who said a flourishing life was the goal of life anyway? So it's all put aside, irrelevant. So I come to the third ghost, vindictiveness. So you've suffered an injury, an unfair dismissal, an injustice, a blow to your dignity, a dreadful event to you or to some person close to you. Rabbi Kushner wrote that little book, Why Do Bad Things Happen to Good People? And often we're in that situation. We say, what have we done to deserve this? Good people, bad things happen. It is understandable that good people want justice, want revenge, want something to appease, to compensate, to soothe their pain. Is it any wonder that anger broods into vindictiveness? The imagination demands some recompense. In one of my books, I outlined the psychology of vindictiveness. Among other things, in vindictiveness, there is this sense of injury to the self, to what is important. And the sense of frustration and helplessness drives the imagination into a frantic search for revenge, for solution. The ghost of vindictiveness, it also holds hands with fear. So these three ghosts walk hand in hand with fear. And the strength of the self is whittled away. Though your anger may give you a sense of strength, as you shout and rave or demand, that anger and vindictiveness can be eating away at your inner self. And any thought of flourishing is tantamount to an insult. How can you flourish? How can you talk about flourishing when you've been hurt as we have been hurt? Revenge and searching for our just deserts surge up in the mind in response to the wrong that has been done. How can a person flourish if they're brooding on anger that is not settled, on a vindictiveness that persists, day in and day out. Some people write to me complaining that in my addresses Sunday morning I'm very strong on what they call psychobabble. You're very strong on psychobabble, but weak on theological assertions. Well, I like the criticism. So let me look at this. I want to say this, that no matter what your status in life, no matter what your patch happens to be, you will inevitably run into these three minds that restrict you: the worried mind, the narrow mind, the vindictive mind. Imagination out of control, fear that closes the mind to tolerance and accommodation, the self that loses its strength, its goodness, and its healing. So as you analyze these three ghosts that I've called them today, you see that the theological assertions that I'm supposed to make often don't immediately fit until we look and say, well, what are these three ghosts really about? When these three forces collude, the road to a flourishing life is closed. But you say, but who said we have to have a flourishing life? Well, go back and examine your theology at that point and see what it says. It might not use the word, but if we take the words of Jesus seriously, at one point he did say, I am come that you might have life and have it in all its abundance, all of its fullness, flourishing life. We so often become encased in our self-concerns and our self-inadequacy, even though externally we might parade as if we are superior. And we often do. Psalm 20, the psalm I read today, we all need to hear it. We all need that power and that energy that the psalm was talking about to draw us out of ourselves. That other book in the Old Testament, the little book of Habakkuk, talks about acquiring hinds feet, that God might give him hinds feet, that he might once again walk in the high places like the hind does. So call that, if you wish, the theology of flourishing. If you want to embrace more than that, take hold of my little book, The Hungry Time, and turn just the first 9 pages, if you wish, 9 or 10 pages, where I present my version of some passages of Scripture. Here's one. We are talking about a new faith. I read it today. We're talking about a new faith. Before we discovered this faith, we were living a very constricted life. Another passage says, give me the utter joy of seeing you live in harmony. Another said, let your heart and mind be lifted into a new life. Another says, there is something within us that stretches far out to the God beyond us, to the source of all goodness, to the source of our deepest consolation. Another said, I remind you to stir into new life the gifts you have received. Put on the colours of those who know God has accepted them. Can I say that again? Put on the colours of those who know God has accepted them. How will you flourish? Is it possible to flourish? I'm frequently made very conscious of people who come and sit beside me and describe to me their pain, their sorrow, their anger, their disrupted life, their despair of any worthwhile solution, any possible healing. How can I speak about flourishing ever again? So let me speak in terms of faith, the new faith that I advocate. And let me also speak in terms of how the new faith can work psychologically and emotionally and existentially in your life. The three minds, first of all, number one, the three lives are imagination out of control, fear out of control, destructiveness out of control. Flourishing requires us to refine a faith in yourself, a strength in your inner spirit, to recover your best self. So that's what we're looking for in a flourishing life. A faith, once again, in yourself, strong enough to look squarely at the imagination out of control, at fear out of control, at your succumbing to destructiveness, self-destructiveness, as well as destructiveness of others. Second, I want you to see, if you can, that flourishing means turning around. Because so often we get stuck in a cul-de-sac, a dead end. I'm stuck. And so I'd like you to get the image of turning around, finding a pathway out of your cul-de-sac. The new faith speaks of an energy that lifts you out of yourself to find life and vitality in more than one place. There is more than one pathway. So if you're stuck on this pathway, I look for myself, I look for you to see, is there another pathway? Thirdly, the new pathway, the new faith speaks of an evolution of the human spirit, a growth of the human spirit. Because so often we get closed and we think that's all there is to it. We've closed in. No, the new faith means embracing the spirit of life. It draws forth the soft emotions, the positive emotions, the goodness and the best of our humanness. It says, don't let your negatives eat you up. It says, don't let your imagination run so much out of control. It says, don't let your fears overpower your best growth. The new faith means strengthening the self in the best emotions of life and allowing it to evolve into the best spirit, a growing spirit. Fourth, some people will say, number 4, some people say to me, I used to be a flourishing person once, but not now. I'm too old. I've been too much hurt. I've lost the energy anyway. As I mentioned earlier today, last month, I took the 5 Sundays to focus on the composer Gustav Mahler. And we were commemorating 100 years since his death in the month of May. Even to the most skeptical person about Mahler's music, I was trying to say, here was a man who, in spite of many griefs and sorrows, many difficulties and great distress, wanted us to hear his music in a way that would breathe new life and hope into us as we heard it. So flourish if you can, somewhere in the small patches of your everyday. Be open to that, to what Mahler called that precious moment, when you know that life is worth living, when a little faith in the spirit of flourishing lifts you. It's like an inspiration, breathing new life, and let it lift you out of yourself. D.H. Lawrence, I think, expressed it beautifully. He said, for man, for woman, The vast marvel is to be alive. We ought to dance with rapture that we should be alive and in the flesh and part of the living incarnate cosmos. My soul, he said, knows that I am part of the human race. My soul is an organic part of the great human soul. I am part of the great whole. What we want is to re-establish the living organic connection with the cosmos, with the sun and the earth, with mankind. He says, start with the sun, and the rest will slowly, slowly happen. Why aren't more people wanting to flourish? Yes, he was writing about a full, expansive flourishing. What a difference it would make if every human being set their life goal to flourish. And where that flourishing has been restricted or damaged or injured, to find new energy, new faith, to flourish again. What a difference that would make. Would you please stand?